So welcome to the Love Your Neighborhood Practitioners Podcast, where we talk with those doing the work on the ground in neighborhoods, practicing this exciting work of resident-led neighborhood revitalization. We believe that when residents are at the center of the change process, we can build sustainable communities from the inside out and break negative generational cycles. It is also just a lot of fun. I'm your host, Austin Maxheimer, Director of Love Your Neighborhood at Community One in Evansville, Indiana. And with me is my teammate and co-host, Hannah Wehr. And today we are talking with Jessica Welcher and Jonathan Boettcher from Community One. Jessica is the Executive Director and Jonathan is the Philanthropy and Brand Director. So our main purpose for having this conversation is to share wins and fails, best practices and practical tips, and to learn from one another as a community of practitioners. We also want to continue elevating Love Your Neighborhood as a real solution for genuine community transformation by sharing stories of real change from those doing the work. So we're going to dig in, and we're taking a slightly different take on this closing episode of this season because we're going to talk from an organizational standpoint. So Community One is a lead agency in a neighborhood revitalization effort, and we want to learn from organizational leaders what that means and how they deploy that. So just by kicking us off, a brief introduction to your neighborhood.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. And our neighborhood, where we get to be a lead agency, is the Tepe Park neighborhood in Evansville, Indiana. This is a really fantastic neighborhood, and I know I say that with a bias for the neighbors and the neighborhood itself. This neighborhood is richly diverse, over 60% racial minority. We have a great mix of home ownership and rental. This neighborhood was an up-and-coming neighborhood in the urban core. And then over time, we know that systemic barriers and urban sprawl happened in our city, as it has in many other cities. And we started to see disinvestment. So businesses closing, homes not being invested in the same way, people moving away. And so it began to experience economic hardship, lack of investment from outside in, and Community one of the things we do in addition to our neighborhood work is housing. And so we started showing up in that neighborhood quite a bit to work on blighted and abandoned housing. And this was 8+ years ago. We kept showing up in the neighborhood and realizing while we were doing work across the city, this neighborhood in particular kept drawing us back. And at the time, it had one of the highest rates of poverty and one of the highest rates of blighted and abandoned properties across our city. And so we believe in an asset-based community development approach. And we knew the greatest asset in this work are our neighbors themselves. And the neighbors in Tepe Park were already grouping together, wanting to see change in their neighborhood, wanting to invest back in their neighborhood, but maybe not seeing the same level of investment and resourcing that other places in our city were seeing. And so we made at least a 10-year commitment to the neighborhood, asked if we could walk alongside them in their vision for flourishing. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of launched our neighborhood work, specifically in Tepe Park. Mm-hmm.
So you guys, like Austin had said, have a little bit of a different role in the Love Your Neighborhood practitioner network. So can you talk about like what role you play in Love Your Neighborhood and how you see the work you do fitting into the greater network of work that's happening?
So I came to Community One in fall of 2022 as their executive director. Our previous ED and our founder was stepping away from the organization after a decade of building and foundational work for Community One. And so it was a really exciting time to come into the work. In my role, I get to support all of our departments, including our housing, our volunteer mobilization, and of course, our neighborhood work. And so most of my efforts are around strategic visioning, sustainability, partnership work, and making sure that our leaders have the resourcing that they need to be excellent in their fields of work. And I get to join you guys in that today, which is exciting. But what's especially exciting about Love Your Neighborhood right now is that we are working on this expansion, creating new opportunities and ways for people to get connected to this framework, to see residents really unleashed to be the change that they want to see in their neighborhoods in a really unique and refreshing way. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to be part of this team. And so I love that we're kind of in some pilot phases of that. We know these things are tested, but now we're getting to see this pilot of how we can share this with more people. And so that's something that I really look forward to every day.
I would just add to that I think in addition to the pretty obvious functions of an organization of like providing the resourcing to sustain the work and just making sure that there's structure there to make it happen, I think we also get to play this role of sort of championing this work in the broader community with other nonprofit leaders, with donors and funders, and just with the broader community in general to share the story of what's going on in Tepe Park and in other Love Your Neighborhood initiatives, and to see those sort of underlying principles that drive that work become more widely recognized and hopefully adopted as well.
Yeah, that's great. And, it's, I've worked alongside you maybe longer than anyone in my life for this idea of city transformation, or transforming the city in the name of Jesus, like gospel informed city transformation, since you were just a young gent with a gleam in your eye.
Yeah.
So through this journey, like what's now coming on to staff at Community One over the last year, what's a moment or experience just in the last year that you've been really proud to be a part of this work?
Yeah, well, I've been excited about Community One's work for a long time, and it has been exciting to join the team in the last year. And I would say one of the highlights that stands out to me is sort of a simple one, where our team got the opportunity to present in sort of a collaborative setting with other nonprofits that are part of a collaborative initiative here in our community. And seeing different members of our team present about good work that's happening in different neighborhoods was really exciting. And then also getting to re-emphasize for leaders in the room this idea of the importance of resident-led vision for change in a neighborhood. And I got sort of nominated to close out our presentation by sharing the story of one of the residents of Tepe Park. And I just felt very honored to get to do that. And I think the reason that stands out for me is I've worked in our local nonprofit community for a little over a decade now. And I know that there are a lot of high capacity leaders and a lot of excellent organizations. But as I've gotten more immersed in neighborhood work, I have even greater respect for residents in their neighborhood, because nobody knows their neighborhood like they do. Mm-hmm. And nobody is more committed to the well-being of the neighborhood and the neighbors than the people who live there. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, as nonprofit leaders, we all, clock out at the end of the day. And so seeing the leadership of residents in their neighborhoods has just made me incredibly proud to be able to be a part of that work that helps to elevate that.
Well, we're very glad you are. Jessica, same question, but I'm going to add, you went to this amazing lunch and learn by this really great teacher, and you got excited about our work even before you started working here, but then you opted in to lead the entire organization. So as you stepped into it, with all the behind the scenes stuff to make that happen, what has manifested from that, your investment of your life, that you're like, man, I'm really proud of this team and this work, and it's everything that I thought it was going to be when I had that amazing lunch and learn.
So yes, that amazing lunch and learn was hosted by our very own Austin Maxheimer. And I was thinking about that as I was reflecting on preparing for this time together. I had gotten to volunteer with Community One several times. I got to go to a lunch and learn, and I have, volunteered my whole life. I've had great experiences with many opportunities to volunteer. But the thing that stuck out to me was the thought process behind the work. So we're not just doing something because we decided it's a good idea, but we're working towards goals that residents have identified for their neighborhood, that are actively participating in the transformation. And this is honoring to God through that. It's honoring and dignified to neighbors through that. And so it felt like this really perspective shift in ministry and community development in a way that I hadn't got to experience before. And then there happened to be a job opening. So I threw my name in the ring. But getting to be on the inside now, seeing how hard the team works, seeing how hard this work is, my answer to that question is similar to Jonathan's in that when I see neighbor stories in the media, on social media, even in conversation, I'm out and about and I hear people talking about Seeds for Success, Tech Me, the Bedford Collab. I get so excited because they're not talking about us.
Yeah.
They're talking about amazing neighbors, amazing initiatives. And I know how hard the team might have worked behind the scenes to encourage or help resource or help support. But our whole premise is, how are we keeping neighbors at the center of this? How are we keeping neighbors the hero of the story? Because they are. And seeing that actually lived out, but then knowing in the same time how hard everyone is working behind the scenes, that just makes me so proud to be on the team. And it makes me excited to share this approach with more people.
Yeah.
There's a tension we manage always of having to share the stories of the work while also not taking credit for any of the work that's done. Jonathan, you've built your whole career and life. I know you've told stories of shooting films as a kid too.
Right.
As you've positioned yourself and honed your skills as a storyteller, how do you see the role of storytelling in the work of Love Your Neighborhood? And then how do you balance that tension of we have to tell stories, but we can't take credit for those wins?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think telling stories that highlight other people and celebrate other people are sort of my favorite kind of stories to tell. But I think so much of neighborhood work is really at its core about affirming the dignity and agency of people in our community who are part of neighborhoods where maybe the dignity and agency of residents in those neighborhoods has been overlooked or neglected by our broader community. And I think that goes with storytelling too, that a lot of the narratives, the broader narratives that people have in their minds when they think about certain neighborhoods in our community are not shaped by the residents of those neighborhoods. They're shaped by outside perspectives. They're shaped by the perspectives of people who are farthest from those neighborhoods and furthest from the challenges that impact those neighborhoods. And so when I think about storytelling in neighborhood work, it's about not just what kinds of stories are we telling, but how are we telling those stories, and how are we including residents and centering residents even in that storytelling process. So being able to celebrate the work of residents in a way that truly highlights their efforts and makes them the hero of the story and never puts Community One as the hero of the story, I think is super important. But also, how can we incorporate residents into the actual storytelling process? And it's been cool to see certain storytelling initiatives arise from within the Tepe Park neighborhood that are residents sharing their own stories and the story of the neighborhood. Oftentimes, we're trying to find residents to even execute the creative work itself too. And it reminds me of this phrase that sort of gets used a lot in this kind of work, which is nothing about us without us, which is the idea that we shouldn't ever be telling the story of a community or even presenting data about a community without having conversation with people who represent that community and saying, hey, what's your take on this data, or what's your take on this story or this narrative? And having that conversation and inviting people to be active participants and to actually lead in how the story of their neighborhood is being shared, I think is so aligned with the heart of what Love Your Neighborhood is about. It's really taking those principles that inform all of our work and just applying it to storytelling.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is really making sure, especially for maybe executive leadership or board members that might be listening to this, there's really great opportunity to make storytelling part of your organizational DNA. So it's not just Jonathan's job or the communication team's job, but anyone on our team can say, when we tell a story about a neighbor, it comes from the neighborhood's voice first, and then we get to share that over. So it becomes part of your culture. It becomes, even the housing team can tell you that. The volunteer team can tell you that. Anybody knows this is how we tell our story. And it doesn't have to be championed by one person in their office, but it becomes this natural reflection of what your organization is.
Yeah. It also kind of helps us define success differently too as an organization. Like if you ask us about our work, we'll tell you a story.
Yeah, that's good.
So that has really been ingrained in our organizational DNA.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Since we're talking about potential sharing the story of Community One as the lead agency, but also trying to make this work clear of how it functions very practically in the real world for neighborhood-based organizations that may want to take or pick up a Love Your Neighborhood approach or framework. Most of these potential neighborhood-based organizations are already organizations. That's why we decided to take that approach, is because they're already rooted in a community, like Dream Center in Jacobsville, Audubon Kids Zone in East End. And so the Glenwood Y, Renew in Lamasco, like these, they're already rooted there. So when you think about an organization adding a whole nother approach or framework to an existing mission and vision as an organization, I know dollar signs, if you're a good executive director, probably come to mind. So what are just some of the challenges with funding this work?
Yeah, I would say in fundraising, you have to think about fundraising not just as asking for money, but fundraising is really about connecting donors and funders to opportunities for them to invest into things that they're passionate about. And when you have that framework in mind in fundraising, the challenge that you immediately run into with Love Your Neighborhood is that most donors and fundraisers are looking for generosity opportunities that sort of convert their gifts directly into services and resources that are going to directly impact individual people. Yeah. So take my donation and turn it into meals for people who are hungry. Take my donation and turn it into mentoring for kids. All of these different ways that donors and funders are able to express care and generosity for people through their giving. And Love Your Neighborhood is doing that in a different way. It's taking a long-term holistic approach to a place, and it's saying, let's dig a little bit deeper beyond the symptoms and caring for the symptoms and tending to the ways that people might be experiencing systemic injustice in our community. And instead, let's sort of get underneath that and empower residents to begin to create and implement a vision for change in the neighborhood. And that's a different sort of value proposition. Yeah. And it takes a little bit more time to really understand how that work works and understand how your investment is impacting people and how it's impacting a neighborhood. And so I think you just have to recognize that you're looking for a particular kind of donor, you're looking for a particular kind of funder, and that it may not be for everyone. And so with that understanding in mind, you sort of have to tell the story of the work and get it out there, get it in front of supporters of your work, and not be upset if it's not the right fit for some donors or funders, but instead just have your eyes and ears open for when does it start to resonate with somebody and when do they maybe want to learn more.
Yeah. Definitely. I've had the pleasure to do fundraising in a lot of different fields, and this by far has been the most complex because it is the long game. When you think about when we established our neighborhood work, we found just a couple funders that were willing to take that risk. It's almost, you could almost view it as like a risky investment because there's this, for the first year, you're really just trying to maybe staff one or two people on the ground. The first year is listening and capturing data, but it's just listening. And so you're not constructing a house in the first year. You're not giving out 100 backpacks in the first year. And so you need just that initial buy-in of people that agree with your values, that believe in the long-term outcomes, and they're willing to kind of sit with you in that. So it's so beautiful to still have those very first initial risk takers who wanted to jump into this work with us to still be partners in our work. But then over time, as you start to have the neighbor stories, see the fruits of the labor of neighbors and of the team, then you start to tell those stories well share the data well, and bring in more people into that work. So for organizations just stepping into neighborhood work, you just need a couple people willing to do that risky thing with you. And over time, as that work broadens, you'll be able to invite more people into it. Also, once a vision for change is created, you have those really tangible goals, and that can also help to create some funding opportunities around that. We know we're trying to move the needle on this particular issue, and you can find people that align in those values too. But yeah, it is complex because it's very nuanced. We move at the speed of the neighborhood, and sometimes that is not for everyone, to Jonathan's point, and that's okay, because we want to make sure that this work, just like we do with our neighbors, our financial supporters, we have deep relationships with, so that we can be honest, this didn't go as fast as we had hoped, or this wasn't as successful as we'd hoped, or it was more successful than we hoped. And we get to have those relationships over years. I got to sit down just before I came to this with someone who's been supporting our work for many years and knows the streets that we're working on and knows the names of neighbors that we're working with. And he doesn't get to spend a lot of time in that neighborhood right now due to his work commitments and his health. And yet he still is part of that transformational story and feels closely connected to the work through the storytelling and the data.
I would just add one more sort of practical tip for organizations as they're thinking about that is, just because a donor might be traditionally oriented more towards those direct service and resourcing types of giving opportunities, doesn't mean that they wouldn't also find value in this kind of place-based work in a more holistic strategy, because the reality is they're probably giving out of love for people and out of a passion for people. And if your organization has been rooted in a place for a particular amount of time, there's probably an opportunity to talk to them about how their generosity toward people that they care about and love in one particular way probably overlaps with a neighborhood strategy. And so just helping them see it through a people-centric lens and see how their investment in other areas is really sort of compounded whenever it's brought together with a resident-led strategy.
Yeah, that's so good. And because we've seen that over the years as we've built a foundation for the work and been invested by, like you mentioned, like people that are willing to take a risk. Like I remember when we kicked off the work in Tepe Park, we had 2 years of only guaranteed funding. And it was like, that's reminds me of like what is it called?
Like a startup,
like
a lean startup.
Yeah.
But like, what are they called? Like the angel investors, like the people willing
Got
to
1 year to turn a profit.
I want the 10x. Yeah. I want the 10x return. I'm the kind of investor, not me. I don't have any money, but some people with money are like, I just want a 10x return on this. When you think about that, well, there's people out there that want that sort of level of investment with that high level of risk if they're willing to see that 10x return on social entrepreneurship too. I think it's an untapped field. But to your point also, like once you've laid that foundation and once you've done that backbone work, there's endless opportunities for investment by people. Like one of our friends that does invest some in our nonprofit has invested significantly in a for-profit business venture around economic development because that's what he's more interested in. And that really creates the environment for really any sort of philanthropy or really community investment to see that change. So,
yeah. And I would say in the same way that I talked about storytelling as an expression of kind of the underlying principles of Love Your Neighborhood, centering residents, I think you're taking the same approach with donors and funders, and you're helping them adopt that same mentality to say, you know what? Actually, we want you to, rather than betting your generosity on our organization, we want you to bet it on the residents. Because just like I talked about before, residents care about this neighborhood more than anybody else. They're more committed to it. They know it better than anybody else. And so if we can take your generosity and apply it to empowering residents, then actually the likelihood of success and the likelihood of sustainable impact in a particular place is much higher, because we're buying into the idea and believing that residents in a particular neighborhood have significant potential, and that if we align with them and align with their vision, that it is going to create that impact. So it really is it's a shift in kind of your strategic thinking about how you're managing resources for impact.
So say I'm a neighborhood-based organization looking to get into this work. Given all that you've just said, Jessica, maybe could you talk about what advice you would give them, how you would tell them to proceed?
Yeah. Yes. So for our MBOs that are thinking about stepping more into neighborhood work, shameless plug for Austin and Hannah, but I mean, we want to buy you a cup of coffee. We want to sit down and treat you to lunch and just learn more about you first. We want to lead with listening, which is one of our important steps in Love Your Neighborhood. So we really want to know where you're at as an organization. I think for leadership that might be listening, you want to think about your organizational health. You really want buy-in. If you have other departments that are serving in other program ways, looking at how this neighborhood work will complement that. What you don't want is just a singular person that's now going to magically fix the neighborhood and then everything else is business as usual. This is really a shift of perspective and approach. And so even if you have other types of programming, you'll want them to understand and be as excited about the neighborhood initiative as the people that are actually staffed to do that. And you'll want your board to have buy-in too. Our boards can make or break us as nonprofits. And so we want to set them up for success, to have them part of the decision-making process. And then we do have a discovery assessment for your organization and for the neighborhood itself. So what you don't want is a neighborhood-based organization that is woohoo, let's do Love Your Neighborhood. And then neighbors that say, we did not ask for this. So it's not going to work very well. So we really want to make sure the neighborhood is ready and wants this, and the organization that's going to be spearheading is also ready for this. And we want to walk alongside you in that process, whether it's our Love Your Neighborhood team or Jonathan and I are always happy to talk with leaders as well.
Yeah, I would say, and I think this is reflected in what you just said, but it's a big commitment. It's an important commitment, and it's not something to just sort of casually try out. It is something to explore and have conversations about with other neighborhood-based organizations, maybe with members of our team, with residents of the neighborhood, certainly. But whenever you are seriously considering stepping into this kind of work, I think you have to have a deep level of commitment and make sure that you've done your due diligence to ensure that you can uphold that commitment. And then I would say it's really easy to get excited about neighborhood work and to want to launch something that's big and exciting, and to think that momentum happens by having this big launch and this big exciting push. But the reality is, most of the time, what happens when we take that approach is the opposite of momentum, because we have this big exciting push, people get really excited about it, and then gradually fewer and fewer people show up and are a part of it. That's the opposite of momentum. Momentum is you start small and you go really deep and intentional, and then it builds over time, and more people are getting excited and more people are joining the vision. And so as I've observed different neighborhoods adopt this kind of work, I'm struck by the fact that it often starts with one or two people knocking on doors in a very small part of the neighborhood, not even the whole neighborhood, and building those relationships really intentionally and going deep with a small number of people, and then building slowly over time. So I think having those expectations of what it looks like to launch something like this is really important. And those conversations with members of our team or with other neighborhood-based organizations can really help with that.
Yeah. And not right now is an okay answer too.
Yeah.
This isn't, as much as we want everyone to be able to adopt this, it might not be for every organization or for where they are right now as an organization. And so it's okay to say, you know what, we wouldn't be able to do this to the level of excellence that we'd want. And that's okay. But there's other learning opportunities too. Maybe you just want to start adopting some of those practices. We can do some learning opportunities with you, or get you connected, or take a tour of an existing neighborhood. And those are great ways to step gently into that and step responsibly into neighborhood work.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a story. I think, our friends at Dream Center share the story of like, they were doing great work, right? Like delivering services and programs, foods to kids, doing youth programming. But they got to a point where they felt like their impact was not creating the return on the investment that they were really hoping. And that came from second and third generation kids, their kids then coming back through the same programs and services. And so I would just add, if you're an organization who just deeply desires to see transformational impact and you're not currently happy with the return that you feel like you're putting in to this work, the amazing work that you're doing, then maybe have a conversation with us. And we also have a free tool in our Love Your Neighborhood toolkit that's open to anyone called Discovery Assessment. If you as an organization are interested in potentially doing that kind of slow burn internal evaluation, answering those questions, you can use that tool to help you discover if you are ready for that. So let's have a little fun and flip the org chart a little bit. Jessica, if you were an on-the-ground practitioner doing the work and felt like your organizational leadership was not resourcing you to the level you need, what advice would you have for those practitioners?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes leaders, even very well-intended leaders, might be focused on other things, or depending on how the organization got into neighborhood work, they may see it as maybe a compliment, but not a full approach. And so it's just not top of mind. There's a lot of other things going on. We want to make sure that we have sustainability and we're following, our bylaws and all those very important businessy things that we must do. And so it's easy to get distracted from the work that our on-the-ground teams are doing. And so for those that might feel kind of this tension of either maybe my leadership doesn't see me or the board doesn't understand this work or I'm only resourced very limited to be able to execute this, I would say keep the faith. Try to lead up when you can. So just because we have fancy titles does not mean that we know everything. And so sometimes we need to have someone kindly offer some additional information to us, but also try to pursue excellence where you're at. So if you only have enough resourcing to meet 5 neighbors instead of 500 neighbors, meet those 5 neighbors and tell their stories really well. If you can only capture data on one block instead of an entire neighborhood, capture that and share that really well. If you have leadership that's maybe more focused on the outputs than the additional information, share those numbers with them. Ask for opportunities to present to the board, to tell them a moving story of a neighbor that's leading transformation. Find those small ways to start to build those things in. And then we have your back too. So if there's opportunities that we can be helpful, if we can connect with peers and other organizations to maybe help with some perspective shift, we want to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I think I would just add, being able to share those stories and data as you approach the work in a very focused way is really helpful and valuable. But we also often talk about how information on its own is not often enough to change somebody's perspective. And so whenever there's opportunity to invite somebody into the work in a way that's gives them more of an opportunity to participate or to meet actual people, I think that can be enormously helpful as well. Even if it's a walk through the neighborhood or going to meet a neighbor that you've already built a relationship with, and allowing other people to have the kinds of experiences that you've gotten to have. And I think a lot of us who have done on the ground work, we can begin to feel frustrated with other people who are not learning the same things we're learning, but we have to remember that we had opportunities to learn those things from experiences that we had. And so it's maybe a little unfair to expect other people to have learned the same things that we've learned when they haven't had the opportunity to experience the same things that we've experienced. So information is great. Invitation is even better and often more powerful whenever there's opportunity for that.
That's a really great reminder to not get frustrated and to find opportunities to teach instead. What is something you wish that other people understood about what you do?
Well, I'm gonna drop a little bit of a hot take here.
That's why we're doing this.
Hot takes.
I got into nonprofit work, I think for the same reason a lot of people do, which is that I wanted to change the world. I saw challenges in my community. I knew people in my own life who were affected by those challenges, and I wanted to make it better. And I think the thing that I want people to understand about nonprofit work is that for the most part, nonprofits are not changing the world. And they can't. Nonprofits on their own will not change the world. I think that's what I would say. We can create programs and resources that care for people, that address the symptoms of a lot of really significant challenges that exist in our community, like poverty and housing and mental health and all sorts of things. We can tend to those symptoms and provide a helping hand to people who are most impacted by those symptoms. And that's really important work. And I don't want to diminish that at all. But the reality is that nonprofit programs are never a replacement for a strong community. And that if we can strengthen communities, if we can strengthen the neighborhoods that people belong to, then a lot of the challenges that exist within our community are able to be addressed both for individual people and for communities as a whole. And as we've said multiple times throughout this podcast episode, so much of this work is about recognizing the dignity and agency of people. And the fundamental problem behind a lot of these challenges is that the dignity and agency of our neighbors has been overlooked or neglected. It hasn't been honored and respected. And so what excites me about this work is that we as a nonprofit are able to invest in strengthening communities that people belong to. And we're focused on empowering residents and communities, because I do believe that a group of neighbors loving one another and loving their neighborhood can change the world, that can overturn some of the systemic inequity and injustice that exists in our community, especially when stakeholders from outside that community come with a posture of humility and listening and say, we want to hear what your perspective is on your community, and we want to align our resources and our programs with your vision for change in your neighborhood.
Beautifully stated.
Yeah. I cannot improve upon that. So,
sorry, I should have let you go.
No, as a leader, I will say thank you for sharing that. We're so glad you're on our team, and I'm not going to try to make that better than it already was. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to land the plane, but I want to just create a little space to share anything that you may have wanted to get out that maybe didn't, or maybe an insight that you even had as we were talking. Just want to create a little space here at the end before my final surprise question.
Oh, no.
I feel like this was a surprise question.
Yeah.
This is a Holy Spirit.
Double
This is
surprise
a-
question.
This is a Holy Spirit question.
Oh boy.
I don't think there's anything like overly pressing to share. I just hope that if this sparked something in a listener, whether you are in more of a leadership or decision-making space in your organization, or you're just a neighbor who is not directly connected to a nonprofit, but this makes you excited about your neighborhood. Also just know you're not alone in like feeling that like spark in your heart that something does need to change, the things that maybe drew us to working in these fields to begin with. But there are already neighbors who have felt that same spark, that are seeing the transformation, that are years ahead of that. And they've already had a lot of hard learns and wins and realizations, and they want to share that information with you, and they want you to be able to experience flourishing that they're getting to experience now. And so just don't feel discouraged, feel encouraged, and know that we're in your corner and we want to help you in that.
Along those same lines, I think whenever you're listening to a podcast, you're often in a posture of just consuming information. The reality is, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you know one of us personally. And if you don't, and you're somewhere else in the country or something listening to this, we're all available to connect. And so I hope that conversations like this, and certainly the other conversations that you guys are having, can be sort of an invitation to connect and hop on a Zoom call or grab a coffee and continue to build this network of people and this community of people who care about this approach and care about this way of investing in neighborhoods.
Okay. You ready for the surprise? So I am on a campaign, a fervent campaign to see more fun in the neighborhood work, because I'm a very serious person. I'm not a fun guy. And I know that one of the best things that you can do is create fun environments for people. So as we listen to all of our practitioners, I just want to ask you, and I'll put Jessica on the hot seat first because she gets paid the big bucks. What do you do for fun?
That is a great question. I, too, am a very naturally serious person. I wore a denim jacket today, for those that are just listening, in an effort to look more fun and accessible. But I'm a really serious person. I'm more of like a blazer girly than a denim jacket. And so I do have to be intentional and fun. And this sounds maybe like you set me up for this question. You did not. I didn't know this was going to happen. But going to the neighborhood and being a part of stuff happening in the neighborhood creates fun for me, especially in the summertime. So going to Summer Bash and see kids spilling down the water slide that we put in the park and neighbors creating these fun opportunities, and I just get to go and be present. That's when it gets really fun, when I can kind of turn off my working brain of sustainability and fundraising and organizational readiness and all these very important things that we talked about today. When I can just be present with people and go to a market that popped up or a produce stand and hang out with people and just laugh and be Jessica, a neighbor, instead of Jessica, executive director. That is very life-giving to me. And that's what reminds me that this work is important, but that doesn't mean it's only serious and not fun.
I also happen to know that you're a beautiful singer and that you like to sing in your spare time. I don't know if that's fun for you, but just...
That is a joy. Also, neighbors love karaoke. So if you're looking for a fun outlet, maybe wheel in a karaoke machine every once in a while.
Jonathan, fun.
I don't know that I'd describe myself as an overly serious person, but I do think that I struggle to prioritize fun in my life. And so I appreciate this question a lot. I would say I enjoy any opportunity that I have to just be silly with other people. So a good example of this was I had some friends over a couple weeks ago, and we played this ridiculous game where you had to pitch different businesses to one another based on a set of criteria. And it was hilarious, and I laughed really hard. But around our office, we do a lot of Photoshop and AI editing with a lot of sort of like custom made inside jokes, sort of memes. And I enjoy that outlet for silliness as well. So any opportunity to have a good running joke with friends is a good time.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for indulging in that. And I would invite you as practitioners to bring that fun to the neighborhood, bring that fun to Tepe Park. And invitation to you, as Jonathan said and Jessica said, we invite you to explore whether Love Your Neighborhood is for you. But in lieu of that, I'd encourage you just to have some fun where you are. So go love your neighborhood.